All right, we have a lot of breaking news to run down. MAGA Pete Hegseth may be in big trouble for his illegal strikes on boats in the Caribbean Ocean, and he seems to be lashing out by getting in fights with Democratic senators behind closed doors. Before we even dig into MAGA Pete's fight with Senator Mark Kelly, I want to point out that the first physical evidence of his boat strikes has now washed up on the Venezuelan shore, and it is very, very damning for MAGA Pete Hegseth. These entire strikes were predicated on the fact that these ships were A, full of drugs, and B, headed to the United States to drop off said drugs. Well, guess what? Many of the boats were headed to Suriname, we now know, so we were just striking random ships, and we now also know that the first physical evidence has washed up and it contained marijuana, not cocaine, not fentanyl, but a substance that is legal in 40 of 50 US states. We also know that the Coast Guard has interdicted 200 plus ships over the past year with no violence whatsoever. And guess what? 25% of those ships, 1 in 4 of those ships, had no drugs whatsoever. So if we continue to strike boats in the Caribbean Ocean willy-nilly with zero due process, it only logically follows that we will end up striking a ship with zero drugs, like we did this time. Pete Hegseth is in big trouble. And to build on top of this, it's also worth pointing out, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday that the United States had, quote, hit an area in Venezuela where boats are loaded with drugs. So he hit not a ship, not boats, he hit an area in Venezuela. This would mark the first known time the United States has carried out operations on land in Venezuela since the pressure campaign began against Maduro. Let's listen to this clip of Donald Trump on a CNN broadcast where he is obliviously announcing land strikes in Venezuela.
We just talked out, I don't know if you read or you saw, they have a big plant or a big facility where they send where the ships come from. 2 nights ago, we knocked that out. So we hit them very hard.
So they hit the facility in Venezuela where ships come from. We had to learn this from some obscure radio interview that he did. And even then, no one could be sure if this was something that really happened or if the president of the United States was just confused. There were a few hours where people were like, wait, did we just strike Venezuela? No one really knows. And amazingly, his work now needs confirmation. And now we know again that the United States hit an area in Venezuela, which is basically a declaration of war. Let's dig into this Pete Hegseth fight with Mark Kelly, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what washed up on that ship. Make sure you drop a like and double check to make sure you're subscribed to the Backstory feed so we can continue to punch back against MAGA media. This says, Pete Hegseth and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly had a contentious exchange last Tuesday as the defense secretary attempted to defend controversial strikes on alleged drug boats. Hegseth, 45, was briefing lawmakers on the Senate Armed Services Committee about the Trump-admin strikes in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean. Some have questioned the legality of the lethal actions, in particular one in early September that killed survivors of a prior strike who were clinging to boat wreckage. After Kelly asked about the strikes, Hegseth contrasted lawful and unlawful orders according to Punchbowl News. This was a direct reference to how Hegseth's Defense Department is investigating the senator for participating in a video reminding troops that they should disobey unlawful orders. This makes me so incredibly mad because Pete Hegseth clearly made a smug remark aimed directly at Senator Mark Kelly when Senator Mark Kelly is in the right. And Pete Hegseth proved Mark Kelly right by giving unlawful orders to do a second strike. It's so funny because Pete Hegseth is smugly standing there like, there's never any reason to disobey any orders. No one would ever give unlawful orders. Meanwhile, Hegseth is actively being investigated for giving unlawful orders. Kelly, a former Navy captain, interrupted Hegseth and said his question was unrelated to the department's probe. Kelly then did an interview on CNN.
Let's bring in Arizona Democratic Senator Mark Kelly. And Senator, you said when you came out of the briefing you have more questions than answers,
yes, same.
As also been said. Sources say you also got into a bit of an argument with Secretary Hegseth. What can you tell us about that and also the briefing?
Well, it seems like he came there with a little bit of a speech for me, which says, again, a lot about him. Even in this closed briefing with a bunch of senators, he's focused on this thing about me and didn't even want to get to my questions. I had some very specific questions for him about these boat strikes, and he feels the need to give a speech. I think it again shows how unserious this guy is.
But what was he saying? I mean, obviously,
I gave you a little speech about the stuff that was in the video and what he thinks about it. And I guess it didn't really surprise me because at this point, about 10 months in, we know who this guy is. He's unqualified for this job. He can't even focus on, answering our questions. We get into this brief, and by the way, it's sort of his brief and Marco Rubio's, but they bring 4 other individuals, so there's 6 of them, and they basically filibustered. Every one of them got to speak for about 5 or 10 minutes. That took up 35 to 40 minutes. We got 20 minutes for questions, and maybe 6 out of the 100 of us.
So Pete Hegseth is being an immature, arrogant, awful leader. No surprise when you hear about stuff like this. The first physical evidence of Trump's airstrikes on boats has now been examined by the New York Times. No fentanyl, no cocaine, just burned packets with traces of marijuana. They killed people for having marijuana on the ship, and the ship wasn't even headed to the United States. A lot of these ships, again, were headed to Suriname. This says, 2 days later, on that same shore, a scorched 30-foot-long boat itself would wash up, then 2 mangled bodies, then charred jerry cans, life jackets, and dozens of packets that were observed by the New York Times and were similar to others that have been found after anti-narcotics operations in the region. Most packets were empty, though traces of a substance that looked and smelled like marijuana were found in the lining of a few. Ted Lieu then says, last week, Judiciary Ranking Member Raskin and I demanded the Department of Justice open a murder/war crime investigation into the illegal strikes ordered by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. If this DOJ doesn't do it, a future DOJ will, because no statute of limitations. And this is a response to a tweet that says, the first physical evidence washed up and it's only marijuana, not cocaine, not anything else. Remember, the CIA is also said to have conducted a series of drone strikes on a port in Venezuela last week, the first known land strike, the same one that Donald Trump just randomly blurted out about. Paul Rickhoff, a veteran, points out, I long ago predicted that Trump would first strike Venezuelan land over the holiday break, after Congress left for the holidays and when much of the press and the country are checked out until the new year. If I wanted to hit another country for a mission that's not authorized by Congress and not supported by most Americans, that's when I do it. The most important story in the world is still that Trump can do whatever he wants with the most powerful military the world has ever seen, and nothing is stopping him. Nothing. There's supposed to be a check in the form of Congress, and yet Congress has ceded that check and allowed Trump to do this. Here is Trump addressing this strike with Netanyahu yesterday.
You mentioned in a radio interview, did the military do that? Sharing what he does about
Well, it doesn't matter, but there was a major explosion in the dock area where they load the boats up with drugs. They load the boats up with drugs, so we hit all the boats, and now we hit the area. It's the implementation area. That's where they implement, and that is no.
He looks so old and decrepit.
He looks so old and decrepit, but he's explaining a drone strike onto Venezuelan land in this clip. Of course, he's thirsty to start new wars while standing next to Netanyahu. I'm going to leave it there. Make sure you drop a like and subscribe. I love you all.